Is this gonna work? Hmm. Hello guys, how are you all doing? Still making a couple preparations, so that's why I delay, but I leave it up so people can come in and hang out and just wait for things to kick off. So how are y'all doing? Hello? Type in chat, y'all. Just drawing a couple things, a couple diagrams, a couple explanation aids, you know. Alright. Okay, I think we are about ready to start here. Just making sure everything is in the right place. Let's go to the screen. Not gonna get any distractions from Wi-Fi, are we? Yes, I gotta turn that off. Where exactly? This one. Alright. Sorry, I was trying to turn off the Wi-Fi there. Okay. Okay. How are y'all doing? Hello. Hello. So today we're going to talk about synthesis. And what is synthesis? And why? Why would we do synthesis? Why would we even come close to such a complex sounding word? Why would we want to synthesize? Well, if we want to create our own sounds from scratch, if we would like to make something very specific happen, if we'd like to use something original that wasn't already recorded, or say we don't have a microphone or we don't have an instrument at hand and a mic, like something that we can record it with, then you can make it using software. You can make a sound using software, and you can do all sorts of cool things that you could do with synthesizers that you can't just do with real instruments. Yeah, you can make cool sounding stuff and also learn a little bit about how sound works and how sound works in the process. All right. So we're gonna look at a couple different ones today. Let's start off by looking at, okay, let's doing this again. It seemed to be working. It's fine. It just takes a restart of the device, and it should start working right away. Give it a minute or so. There we go. So we can start off by looking at a synthesizer and sound trap, because it doesn't get much more simple than this. But as we go through it here, we're gonna break away and explain a certain part, just before we go on and as we go through it, right? Okay. Here I am. Hello. So looking down here. So how do you get to this screen? I'll start from having that. I'll start from just the main screen here. Remove this. Okay. So you want a synthesizer. You go add a new track. You'll want to come down here to synthesizer, and this can be on any track. You could choose any of these and eventually change it to a synth, unless it's guitar, bass amp. But just choose synthesizer, and you will be brought to this screen. With here you can choose a bunch of presets, so sounds that other people have designed already with the synth. Just put in turn the knobs a certain way and put on certain effects, and they called it something, and you can select it here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go down here at the bottom right, and we're going to click on this tweak, and that brings us to the actual synthesizer that is generating the sound. So we're going to look at this from left to right, because this is kind of logically laid out. So this is quite nice. We have OSC1, OSC2. These are called oscillators. We're going to talk about these first, but I'm just going to go through the others briefly. We have a mix, so these two oscillators are what are making our sound, and we'll talk about why they're making the sound and what an oscillator is in just a minute. But they're making our sounds. They're going into this little mix box right here, this slider, which basically says if it's all the way at the top, only the first oscillator will be making noise. And if you bring it to the middle, it's like 50-50. You'll have oscillator 1 and 2 both playing at 50% volume and both making noise. And then vice versa, all the way down here, only oscillator 2 is going through. Also, you have the option of turning it on or off. I'm not sure what this... Alright, I've got multiple sound sources here. Yeah, that doesn't seem to... Okay, I'm not sure if this little on or off. I think that's turning off this fine control, or turning on the fine control. But anyway, just two oscillators. There's a mix between them. Then they go into a filter section. We have done quite a bit on filters. We have talked about them in terms of EQ, right? Because the EQ is made up of a bank of several filters from different frequency ranges. This one's just got a basic built-in filter. It's got an envelope that controls that filter. We'll talk more about what an envelope is today. It's a type of modulation. Modulation is extremely important in synthesis, and we'll spend a lot on it because that's kind of the heart and soul of it. You have the controls for the filter. So you have the cutoff, which is let me just quickly switch to my iPad view. So you have the filter here. We have your frequency here. This is in hertz, right? Low frequencies like basses and my voice right now because it's the morning, and high frequencies, which is stuff like cymbals and hi-hats and you know what a high frequency is. You'll be able to tell. Yeah, so low frequencies on the left, high frequencies on the right. You have this shape above everything. Below the shape, this is all the audio. This is all the stuff that's being let through. This is the stuff that's this is a low pass filter. All the stuff on the left side. Whoops, that's probably should put it on here. All the stuff on the left side is being let through, is being heard. But all the stuff on the right side, all of the frequencies on the right side, all the high frequencies are being cut out. But it depends on where this curve starts to slope down. Depends on the cutoff. So it can be here or here, and I'll draw this in purple. So this cutoff can move. And the position of that cutoff is controlled by this this knob right here, the cutoff knob. Then you have resonance, which basically adds a little peak to it, so I can redraw my low pass filter up here. So I'll just draw a miniature version. So you have a low pass filter with no resonance, and then if you turn the resonance up, you start to get sort of a little peak before it goes down. And then as you turn out the resonance more and more, so let's say this is around 50% or so. This is 0% resonance, so the knob will be down here. And then up here, if you had it all the way up, you would get something very... You get a very pronounced peak, and it would go up it would be quite a bit louder there. So this would be like resonance, like 85 to 90% or so. Not 100%. 100% just like... It depends on the filter, really. But that's kind of the general shape of a low pass. And then a high pass is kind of the inverse. You just take this picture, flip it 180 degrees, you have a high pass filter because everything on the left is being cut out and yada yada yada. So we have two sound sources. Okay, let's go back here. We have the two sound sources, oscillator 1 and 2, going into a mixture of the two, so basically volume for each one. Then it goes into a filter unit, and you can choose the filter shape here, but with this box, looks like we have a couple to choose from. We have a peak filter, we have a bandpass filter, a high pass filter, and a low pass filter. And by the way, the difference between 12 and 24 we will get into more when we have a synthesizer that shows us like pictures of the filters. I have a good one for that. Amp envelope. So this is, again, a little bit more on the modulation. This is another envelope. We'll talk about modulation more once we talk about oscillators. Let's go back in there. And then we have LFO1, LFO2. These are actually more modulation sources. LFO standing for low frequency oscillator. So then that should bring us away. And then at the end we have just a gain. So like if it's too loud, you can turn it down. So what is an oscillator? So you have to think, to understand what an oscillator is, you have to know what oscillation. What is an oscillation? An oscillation is something that moves back and forth steadily. Like think of a pendulum, like that, or the swing set or something. You push it, it comes back, and once it goes to one side, the gravity starts to pull it back to the middle, and then it goes, and it has enough momentum to go to the other side, comes back down, and creates this repetitive oscillating motion. So that's what you would call that repetitive motion, is an oscillation. So I have a good little diagram for that. So imagine, right, you have, like, this would be your swing, it's going back and forth, and if you were to sort of draw, like, if it was going, if going down was like increasing in time, so this is like as time goes by, if you were to track the path of that ball, it would make a sort of shape like this. It would make like a wave. And you call this a wave. And in fact, in math, this is called a sine or cosine. You may have encountered this. Now, I hope you have encountered this. You may not have been paying attention that day in trigonometry, but very important concepts in math, sine and cosine. They just basically plot a repetitive motion like this. This can be encountered other ways as well. So maybe another place you could encounter a sine wave. Let's say if you were to draw a circle. Yep, I can draw perfect circles. Thanks to technology. And if you were to say go around the circle, right? So if you had like this dot that was going around the circle and you trace the path of that dot, I should give myself more room for this one. Yeah, let's go down here. Let's just find all of the explanation I'm skipping over. Just wanted to show you this really quick. So if you were to trace the path of this dot in both horizontal direction and the vertical direction, you would get sort of, it starts here, then it goes down, and then it slows back down, it comes back up, slows back down, back up, because it goes like here, and then it comes back around. So like, imagine the dot being here. So and I'll draw it in different colored segments. Whoops. Whoopsie. I need to redo. I think I need to hold down. Yep. Okay. So it makes that kind of shape. Let's say this were orange. That would be when it is here. Then if it were purple, it would be here, right? So on and so forth. And then if you started vertical, it would go up to here, and down to here, and over to there, and then back and forth. So, sine, cosine starts at 1. Okay, so you get, so on this side, you get cosine. This side, you get sine. But this is not a math class, so I just wanted to show you this because this is something really cool that this is just one of those things that came back to me. It's like, we are on the we are talking about waves, and it's cool to show where they come from. Well, they come from circles. They come from nature in a lot of ways. So, like tracing the path around a circle, or for example, or looking at a swinging pendulum. Those are just 2 examples. There are many more. And as I think of them, I'll try to come up with more. But point being is that this oscillator, this wave path, can also trace the path. You saw, I've drawn a little diagram over here. It can also trace the path of a speaker cone going back and forth. So you might know that whenever you play audio or any kind of music through a speaker, if you watch the speaker, or you feel the speaker, or you can feel the vibrations coming from it, and you can also see the speaker cone going back and forth. And this, if we were to be playing a certain kind of, like, never mind that. How can I say this? The motion of that cone, the motion of the speaker cone, is actually kind of tracing the waveform that's going in. So, like, let me go to like a little waveform here. Perhaps in Soundtrap, I will pull one up. If we were to go way in on this waveform for the bass sample, this basically, when it's on the bottom half, or whenever it's on the bottom half, whenever it's on the top half, the bottom half would tell you when the speaker cone is like has moved inwards. So like, this is all of the stuff in the waveform. I should draw it like this. So when the speaker cone is more is being sucked back into the box it's in, it's all of the stuff on the left side of the waveform. And then when it is pushing out, that represents all of the positive stuff, the stuff above the line in the waveform. So the motion of this wave, or a simple wave, represents the motion of the speaker, in a sense. So if you see the movement of when a song is playing, the movement is rarely like just simple back and forth, because it's a really complex sound. It's like a mixture of many sounds, so therefore the movement all of the speaker all gets mixed together as well, and you end up with some really complex shape, which makes up the sound that you're listening to. I hope that makes sense. But moving on. Anyway, so we get that the oscillation, that an oscillator can represent the movement of a speaker in its shape. So this I've written here. This wave can also represent the path of a speaker cone that vibrates at a certain frequency. Now this is key. The speaker cone is vibrating to produce a wave, a frequency wave that's going through the air at a certain frequency. And that's how fast that wave is going back and forth. It tells you how low or high pitched the sound ends up being. So like something going at, remember, and we can only hear down to 20 hertz. Hertz is how we hear it. Hertz is how we measure frequency. So if you had a wave going through the air, a sound wave that was going at, or that was produced by a speaker moving at 40 hertz, you'd be able to hear that as really low bass noise. If you had something coming out at 2000 hertz, then you'd be able to hear as a more mid-range, like much more audible noise. And so on and so forth. That is you getting that wave through the air, but So okay, let's assume we understand that, and right. So there's not only just this shape. So this is just one of the possible wave shapes there are, and it says said the different wave shapes they create different sounding tones. So depending on that shape, it will give you a different sounding result, with more or less what are called harmonics, and we'll just kind of look at those and first visually and just kind of figure out from looking at it what it is instead of trying to explain that from nothing. Now, let's hear these. Let's hear these so that we get another perspective. So, the sine wave. This is the most basic wave shape there could be. The most basic, purest form of sound. So, what does it sound like? Well, let's find out. Let's find out how to get there in Soundtrap, first of all. I may have already gone through this, but I'm going to quickly again. So you load up the Flutter Wave, Flutter Wave is the default synthesizer patch. Let's do it from scratch. I don't think there's anything on these two tracks. Okay, I can remove these. So let's find a sine wave in Soundtrap. Lose up Flutter Wave. We'll go to Tweak. And we're going to, so I think Flutter Wave comes with some preset effects on it. We're going to go ahead and turn those off and set our basic amp back to the preset settings. No reverb, just full on volume. No effects, basically. Let's get it to sound like, let's get it to have just the waveform, no modulation on it. Full sustain. We want no filter motion. And we want no LFO happening. Good. These are both turned off. Good. So we have oscillator 1 and 2. We're just going to hear oscillator 1 because the mix is all the way up here. So then let's... Yep, just making sure. Okay. And also let me make sure that there's nothing playing here. Okay, good. Alright. So let's pick sine. So I just click through this box here. You can pick different shapes. Sine. So let's pick sine. Alright, something is off here. It's supposed to be much more. Okay, it seems that we are still hearing. Oh. I guess mix wasn't cutting it out entirely. Okay, I had to turn off oscillator 2. So yeah, so we're just hearing oscillator 1 right now. If you don't want to hear that other one, then turn it off through the button here. So sine. I think I have to adjust fine to the middle. Yeah. Okay, now it's in tune. So we have a this is what a high frequency sine would sound like. And here's what a low frequency would sound like. If you have a less capable speaker system, you probably won't be able to hear this one because it's so low that I don't want to get too much into speaker physics, but it's basically if the speaker's too small, it can't play that low of a frequency. It has to do with the makeup of the speaker and how if the speaker's bigger, then it can vibrate slower and produce lower frequencies. So I'll just kind of stick around this range. Okay, so that's a sine wave. Again, we'll take a look at the wave shape. And I'm going to compare it alongside of a more advanced synthesizer known as Serum, because this one will give us a clear picture of what the wave shape looks like. Okay, so if we pick here, we'll go to basic shapes. Alright, so here is what a sine wave looks like in another synth. I'm going to mute this one. And we'll just hear sine wave here. So this is right, you get the point. But that's what it looks like. We can also have a 3D view, but that's just don't worry about that. Okay, let's take a look at, or take a listen to another type of wave shape. So this one, we'll skip to this one. This one is sort of like the get to my iPad here. This one, the next one is called triangle wave. It's sort of like the sine wave, but instead of the edges being sort of smoothed out and going like this, it just goes up and then immediately cuts down and then goes back up, immediately cuts down. And I talked about speaker physics. At this edge, there might, like when you have a big enough cone, a big enough speaker cone, your speaker might not be able to just go all the way in and then come back out. Actually, I'm going to show you a video real quick, just to show you the motion of a speaker. I had this up and I did not show it. Let me show you what a speaker actually does. So this is a speaker cone in slow motion and playing various frequencies. So take a look. So here you can see the actual, what's called the diaphragm in the middle of the speaker box, moving out back and forth at a certain pattern. So this one looks like it's playing, oh, that's moving a little faster, and then it's moving a little, seems like it's going all over the place. This is because it's playing a really complex sounding, or complex waveform. Oh wow, that is strange. But yeah, that's what a speaker diaphragm looks like. And if it were, the motion would be a lot less noisy, would be a lot less jittery if it were playing a sine wave, because it would be smooth, right? It would be going boop, 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 just smoothly in and out. Because, right, it's tracking the motion of, oh, here it is for another angle, apparently. Yeah, something more like this. Now that's more kind of like, oh, it was a sine wave for a minute, for a second. But, what about a triangle wave? Well, let's just hear what it sounds like. It's going to create some harmonics. What are harmonics? Well, they are sort of like notes that appear above the original note you're playing, and extra notes that are layered on top. But they're not really notes. They're just kind of, they just add to the sound, or they add to the timbre. So let me explain by showing you a. So let me make sure that my FX demo is not playing anything. Good. I'm going to load up an EQ afterwards, because this is going to allow us to look at the frequency makeup of what we're seeing. So it's going to allow us to look at the frequencies. So you may remember from the other day when we were looking at the EQ effect that we had a graph of frequencies. This is going to be useful for us, because now we can play this synth. I'm going to move it down here. And we can take a look. Let's move back to sine, first of all. Let's just move back to sine, because this is, I had said before, the most pure type of wave there is. And, well, what does a sine look like on our EQ? So you kind of have a bunch of stuff going on. That's like kind of that click at the beginning. But then once it settles out, let me even try to get rid of that click by adding in a little bit of attack to our envelope. Okay, kind of lessened it a little bit. So, ignoring all that other stuff, this is what a C looks like. This is what a sine wave looks like in terms of frequency. So in time, it would look more like this. It would look like the wave. It would look like this diagram down here. It would look like that shape, but here it shows you. Let's kind of find one that's around 1K. You can see as I play different frequencies. This is B or C appears to be around 1K. So this is 1 kilohertz, this note right here. Or a little bit below. It's kind of painful, so I won't do that. And if I play multiple notes, you can see that their different peaks are happening at the same time. Right? Cool, eh? But then let's look at the triangle now, and you'll see what I mean by extra notes added on top. So let's go to there, and now take a look. So we've got that original note, but you've also got peaks here. You got one here, you got one here, 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 and all the way down, and they continue on. And you can see extra little peaks appearing, right? In addition to this first, what you would call the fundamental. So when you have the sine, you only have that fundamental frequency. So the biggest one, right? That's our fundamental. And then you have these smaller ones that are lower, but are all adding together, and they're kind of in this pattern, right? They're kind of in this series. So I'm saying, I'm just kind of skipping over all of there's lots and lots of math behind all of this, and behind what makes up certain frequencies, and going between frequency and time with maths, but we're going to avoid all of that. I'm just going to say the triangle wave has some harmonics. So it's got a few. It's really close in shape to the sine. It's just kind of like a sine but sharpened. So it's got a couple more harmonics. But then let's say you were to then have a square wave. So it's just off, on, off, on, off, on. So out, in, out, in. That motion from out to in, you're thinking like, okay, well, how in the heck is a speaker going to emulate that? There's no way that it can create instant motion. Well, that is compensated for, more or less so, by the presence of harmonics. So let's look at a square wave. It's like, okay, well, you're looking at it. It's like, how in the world there is a little bit of time for the speaker cone to move, but it can't. It physically can't, and that's where those higher frequencies come in that results in higher frequencies. Now, this one sounds really, really rough. This one's got quite a lot of frequencies. I'll play this down lower, and you'll see. Look at all of them. You've got ones that are kind of going down in a series. They don't go down as low. Like with the triangle wave, they kind of wavered off quickly in volume. Like here with this oscillator shape, you can see it's there, but it's subtle and it kind of blends in. With the square though, it's really, really noticeable. You got lots of noise on top, and it just increases as you get higher and higher. You get more and more harmonics. This is especially good for bass sounds because you get like a full spectrum thing going on. So it's not just bass, but it's like actually your entire spectrum, your entire frequency range. So this note I'm playing down at like E flat or like C, but I'm getting energy. I'm getting frequencies all across the spectrum. It gets even more crazy when you have chords using this. Okay, what about in Soundtrap? What does Soundtrap square sound like? Okay, let me turn it on. Honestly, it sounds a little bit less noisy than Serum's version. So you'll have slight variations because this is at the end of the day, this is software and different people code this stuff, and so you'll get different sounds depending on what software you use. So Soundtrap kind of had I would say a more mellow sounding square, so maybe less rough around the edges. This one though is just like dirty. Lots of noise. But that might be something you want. That might, and in fact, that's definitely most probably something you want if you're trying to go for like a bass sound or something like that. All right. Now, let's take a look at the sound. That's the wave shape that gives us not many harmonics like a square wave, but all of them. Sawtooth. So this is... So let's see. Let's go. Oh, also, check this out. You've got different variations of the square wave. Before we go on to Sawtooth, I'd like to actually talk about this because this is one of the more interesting wave shapes. You can take this square wave, right, and you can manipulate it. You can say, all right, what? Okay, I didn't want a circle. What the heck? Basically, you can manipulate how long it stays on for. So if you think of this as like an on-off switch, right? If you think of the square wave as going on, off, on, off, on, off, right? It's not actually doing that in reality. It's kind of like positive, negative, speaker out, speaker in, speaker out, speaker in. But if you're considering it as a switch, you could say, all right, what if I only had the... Well, okay, also another concept that's needed to understand this is you have... this is like a repeating shape, right? What you would call one segment of it, one repetition of it, this is called a cycle. Sorry, this is one cycle, right? One cycle of the wave. Cool. And there's terms associated with it, like math terms like period and frequency. Well, there is quite, it kind of does play in, Yeah, let me do a little bit of explaining. So, one repetition of this waveform is a cycle, right? And if you were to put per second, how many cycles per second that is, or how many? Yeah, if you have this unit, this also stands, this is the same as frequency, sort of. How many cycles per second there are. I mean, that's pretty much how many times this shape repeats in a second determines your frequency, because like this would be a higher frequency, and then maybe you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cycles per second. Right? And so on and so forth. So you could take this one cycle and you could say, all right, what if it was only on for, instead of 50% of the time, 25% of the time, and then 75% of the time it was off, and then you were to repeat it. So then you had a cycle that looked like this. And this is also possible. I'm not making it shorter on purpose. I'm just saying that, okay, you could have this length be more or less. You could even have it like this. Do it like that, and then like that. Whoops, that was not intended. But yeah, you get the idea. It goes, you can adjust how long that positive time is for, and you get a different sounding wave as a result. So let's actually play with this then. There are ways to take a waveform, and this is with more advanced synths. Soundtrap doesn't really have a way of doing this, But that's fine. We'll just show you the possibilities. You can take a waveform and you can transform it. You can modify it. You can modify the shape of that wave before it even is filtered or modulated. And we'll get into, you know what filtered means. Modulated just means one of these parameters are changed by something else. So you could, I'm just going to do a quick transform here called BWM. You can see here that you can adjust how long that is for. So maybe adjust it to a normal square. You can hear the effect it has on the wave. So all sorts of fun stuff you can do with it. But before let's hear saw now. So Sawtooth is a very common waveform. It's the most rich waveform there is. So there is this one. Oops, I think I'm still playing. No, I'm not. There's our Sawtooth. So that's the shape is somewhat like this, right? Because this is the whole cycle. It's just a ramp. It's a downwards ramp here, but you know, it's the same thing. If you were to do this way, if you were to do this way as opposed to that way, right? It's the same shape, but like flipped over. Then you can see a nice 3D view of them. So you have your sine. I'll go through each sound here. So we have our sine, and you can look at the frequencies as well. So you have our sine, and then we have our sawtooth. You can see many, many frequencies, many, many harmonics above it, right? You have your fundamental frequency here at the F, and then you have several harmonics above it. Getting very, very dense here at the higher frequencies. So sine, sawtooth, triangle, square wave, an adjusted square wave with more time off, I believe. Yeah. So this one, or no, more time on. So this one's 75% on. And it has a different sound. Right? Oh, here's one with even less. Right? And you can see it gets thinner and thinner. And the sound gets thinner and thinner. Now you might be asking, hey, what if I were to create any sort of shape for this cycle? It doesn't have to be a basic shape. It can be a complex shape. It could be something like, oh, I don't know. Okay, it has to go from left to right, though, right? It has to be... It can't go backwards, obviously. But it could be something like this. Oops, okay, maybe a ramp up. And then it would do a step down, and then a curve, and then a steep drop off, and then okay, hold on. Notability likes to straighten out my lines, and then maybe it doesn't come all the way down, does this weird thing, and that's the cycle. Okay. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make that, but Serum will offer us some ability to do something. Let's choose basic shapes. We're going to go into our editor. All right. Let's choose this. So we want to ramp up. Or we want to ramp up and then a plateau. So plateau here. And then we want a drop off. So something down here. And then maybe it comes up and then goes down. And then kind of curves back in, sorta. Alright, we need to smooth these bits out here. Can I... Oh, what did I just do? Anyway, alright, well, fine. Let's see what this wave sounds like. It's like I'm adjusting the wave shape. You can hear it in live time, what it's doing to the sound. This is really kind of a cool way to work. And the coolest thing about Serum is, let's say you were to make another kind of wave shape. Maybe a couple more. I don't know, I'm just kind of picking at random. So let's say we wanted these three waveforms. Okay, we'll move all except selected. And then I want to morph between them. Let's do it this way. And then you could dynamically change the wave shape. I'm sure that flew over your head, but check it out. So you've got basic wave shapes, and this is more of a complex one. I just kind of did this at random with the tools I had. I could go much more in depth and kind of draw this out exactly as I wanted. I could increase the division and I could go as in depth as I wanted to, but I have some wave shapes here, and I have done what's called a morph. And now check out what happens when I move this wavetable position knob, WT pause. Cool, eh? Changes the shape dynamic. Let's pick from something that is designed. I have a lot of pre-made wavetables here. Let's choose this one, I guess. So we can see here, if we pull up a 3D view, this is what the wave looks like. So you have various cycles of the wave. So if I were to click here, you can see as I move through, you start with the saw, and then it just grows in. And the amount of harmonics it has. Let's hear it. Ooh. Now, you could also affect the wave. So, like, perhaps this wave was made from affecting a existing. What? Ignoring how it was made. It sounds cool, right? Let's try another one. So, as I move between various cycles of the wave. Now, let's say I wanted this to move automatically for me. I wanted to play the key, and it would go through all these cycles, and it were to go through, you know, all of the snapshots, etc., etc. All of the shapes I had made, or I had picked a, and we'll do some sort of modulation in Soundtrap. It'll be with a filter though, but I just want to demonstrate the concept of modulation by building a patch, right? I'm going to go ahead and build a patch as I build a patch, usually. And then I'm going to go in Soundtrap and make something a little bit more basic. So, I picked my waveform. Kind of not sure what I want to go for. Do I want to go for a bass sound? Or chord sound. Usually you can get much more interesting results with the bass because, like, you're just working with, like, a single note there. Like, I'm gonna play quickly my soundtrack project. So I want to have something that works into this. Yeah. So let's go and yeah, I'm gonna make something that works into this beat. Let's do here. I'll loop a section and I'll have it playing in the background, and I can play along with my serum, with my synthesizer. I'm gonna move my loop region to the towards the end here. I'm gonna use this new section I made the other day. Whoops. Let's mute this other stuff. This is something I had going yesterday. I want to go down to 125. Let's record something in so I don't have to constantly play the keys. Here, let me try this again. 2, 3, 4. That might do. Okay. So I'm going to add an LFO to this wavetable position, and let's talk about what an LFO is. So I've talked to you already about an oscillator, and I had said that, well, an oscillator is representing something that moves back and forth, and it has a certain frequency. Well, LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. I'll repeat myself. Stands for low frequency oscillator. So we in Serum we have 4 of them, and actually in Soundtrap we have. Let me pull up the instrument. Go. Okay, it's already pulled up the tweak. We have 2 of them actually in Soundtrap. So we have ways of creating motion within our patch inside Soundtrap. But first I'm going to do it in Serums because I have more options here. And I can make cooler things happen. So we have an LFO one here. So you can see that its shape, I think it, yeah, this is a triangle wave right here. Why did I think about it? Because I'm thinking about the cycle, and because it goes up to it doesn't go negative exactly. If it were a triangle wave, perhaps, or it could start in the middle and then go down. Anyway, but yeah, it's a basic triangle wave. You start with that's the default here. But I want to create my own that can move all these points around and create whichever shape I want for this low frequency oscillator. And you see here it moves at a certain rate. So this is the frequency of that oscillator. This oscillator is too slow for us to hear because our ears can only hear down to 20 hertz. This LFO might be above 20 hertz, which in that case you're still not going to hear it because it's not going to the output, right? Synths are made up of like modules that are like attached to each other in certain ways, or they're like routing audio to each other. So like oscillator A and B are going into the filter and then are going in to the output. But this LFO is not actually going to the output in any way. It's just used for changing parameters around, changing knobs around. So I'm going to change the wavetable position. So I'm going to move LFO1 to wavetable position. And now you can see we have a blue bar on it, which means, okay, this LFO is going to control this knob by this amount. It's going to control it by the whole thing. I mean, I don't want it to control the whole thing. I'm going to pull that back. Pull that back about here. So then we can see, when we play, you can see the wavetable move. You can hear what it does to the sound. So now I'm going to kind of like move it around. Find a good... Maybe I want it to move the other way. And I'll adjust the shape. Maybe something fast. There. I'll maybe lower it with another one, or combine it with another oscillator. It's too rough. Ooh, that's nice. Let's put a filter on just oscillator 2. So I want to move the cutoff of that filter with this as well. And then I've got some effects I can apply afterwards. I'll put a compressor on to control the volume. Maybe slow this down. I want it to start with the note. Maybe I'll have another LFO that's a little bit faster and move something else about the wave. That doesn't do much. Oh. Oh, there we go. Maybe if I apply it to the other waveform as well. There we go. And you can see it just gets really complex really fast on the EQ. let's okay, but that's just kind of a little sneak peek there. Let's do a different synthesizer. So Ableton's got some. It's got some built in. One of them being analog. This is kind of the most basic one they've got. It looks complex. It looks like there's a lot going on, but it's just kind of like, it's just all the stuff you would need in a synth just compacted down into as little space as possible. So ignoring all aspects about visual appeal, and it does look good, but it's not exactly the beginner's synth at first glance. But it is quite simple. You've got two oscillators here. You got oscillator 1, oscillator 2, and these gray boxes. You select the if you click on this box, you can see here it's kind of got, it's got like a section, right? You click on that section with your mouse, and you can see here it selects it. It selects that section. So I'm selecting octave 1 here, or oscillator 1 here. F1, F2 is going to filter 1. It's got this shape. So right now it has a sawtooth shape. It's got a sine, square, and actually noise. This one is a noise oscillator. So we'll just do this. So if I turn it on noise, turn off oscillator 2, and turn on the record ready for that track, you just get noise. Let me pull out the EQ just so you can see what the frequencies look like. That's our noise. Sine. And you can see here that I am playing a sine wave, right? But you can see there's a couple extra harmonics. Why is that? Why are there a couple extra harmonics in addition to the sine wave? Well, not all synths are coded the same, and some may have errors here and there, and may have more or less pure sounding waveforms. So it's not that all sine waves are perfect in frequency, right? Perfectly represented. This one's got a couple extra harmonics added to it. Fine. It's not a perfect sine. That's okay. It still sounds pretty sine-like, and those harmonics might even help it out if you're playing something low. It might make that sine just a little bit more audible. Give it a little bit more thickness, because I think if you're starting with a sine, you rarely use just the sine wave in music anyway. Everything's going to have harmonics. And when you process things through effects, that also adds harmonics sometimes. So I wouldn't say pure is necessarily the goal, but it's a good way to tell. All right, what does a pure sine tone sound like, and what is it not like? What is you know. What does a sine wave sound like? This is not a pure sine. You probably can't even hear it. Let me go up an octave. But it's got sine wave. It's got a saw wave. It's got square wave. And you notice how different it sounds from the Serum one. Like, it says they're the same shape, but they're not actually the same shape. They're slightly different. You got some controls here for the octave of the sound. So if I were to turn this up, it would go up or down an octave. Semitone. Goes up or down a semitone. Easy. Detune goes up or down sense. So there are actually pitches in between semitones. Like, semitones are just like the notes on the piano, but there are notes that are out of tune too. Like, what about the pitches, the hertz values, the frequencies in between the known, or the pitches, right? So like you have, what about the note between B and C? Right? What about the note between E and F? There aren't names for them, but you can technically, if you detune an E up, like here you have your F, and then right? You have this kind of whatever, this note in the middle. So it's like a quarter tone, or like instead of a semitone, it's a quarter tone, or even a, God, I don't think it goes any lower than that, or it could theoretically go lower than that, but no one's gonna write music like that because it doesn't sound good. But for effect, if you wanted a slightly detuned sound, if you wanted maybe one oscillator to be tuned down a little bit, to be out of tune a little bit with another one, let's do that, for example. So maybe you wouldn't practically use the detune knob to move, or to detune a sound, but let's say you had two oscillators going on. So let's put this one on, make sure they're the same shape, everything's going on the same. Okay. Now I'm going to detune this one up. And you kind of hear them like, and you can even see it in the frequencies. Like, look at this wave. You start to get some sort of interesting, like, what's called phasing, or interference between the two waves, between the two oscillators. So let's try this out. Let's try this out on kind of a bigger scale too. This is how people make those. If you ever heard of a super saw, I will make one real quick. Like, it obviously starts to become a chord if you detune it far enough away, but if you have it close enough, and then maybe detune the other one down, you get a cool sound. It's still kind of the note, but like you get this really cool sounding variation, right? You know, it's almost like bees buzzing around, right? Right? Cool, eh? Just by taking two sawtooth waves and bringing one down a couple cents, or up a couple cents, meaning like, well, let me define a cent. A cent is basically 1/100th of a semitone, or a half step. So there are 100 steps, 100 defined steps between a semitone, or between two semitones. At least that's how we have just historically done it over time. You know, we have decided that, and this might not have been the case like way back in the day, before we had come up with a 12-tone system and all of that. But I digress. There are, in a computer anyway, on software, you have divisions between. You are capable of going to pitches that have divisions between 100, right? You have 100 options. So technically, if you were to consider all of the possible tones that you could have in an octave, like let's just have fun for a second. Like, all right, there are 12 semitones in an octave, right? 12 different notes you can go to. Therefore, that means there are also 100 different pitches you could have for every semitone. So that is technically 1,200 different unique pitches that you could have between an octave. Or at least that's the way the computer is coded to do it. So that meaning that there are 1,200 cents between every octave. So good to know, and you'll encounter cents a lot more as you go through and synthesize things. Especially if you go out and get, and I could even, if you're interested, if chat is interested, if the viewers are interested, I could recommend some cheap. I mean, we've got Soundtrap already. We got the synth, but like, it's limited. It's very limited. you'd like perhaps some guidance on where to start looking for better synths and better DAWs, let me know. This one is my favorite, personally, the Ableton. I like this one the most. But there are many other DAWs out there, many other programs for making music, and lots of synthesizers, because people make programs for the programs. They make the synthesizers the instruments that are built in, right? This is like here, for example, Serum. This is an external software, right? Serum, you can see it's just a black box. Some other developer made this, and then I downloaded it and I installed it as like an add-on in my Ableton. So essentially, you could get Serum. Serum's pretty expensive, but you could get this, and you could use it in any of the software you can make music in, except Soundtrap. Soundtrap does not have what's called AU and VST support, meaning plugin support. It does not have plugin support yet. I'm hoping they get on that real soon, because there are so many, just countless plugins out there for countless of plugins and effects and instruments. But you know, let's take a note. Let's see. So we have this angry bee sound that we made by just detuning a couple octaves, or a couple oscillators. And then next to that we have filters, right? So filter 1, filter 2, and then amp 1 and amp 2. And in order to talk about amp 1 and amp 2, I'm going to talk. I had just mentioned earlier and mentioned the LFO, the low frequency oscillator. Well, I forgot to mention what an envelope is. So right next to that, we have two ways here of putting in modulation. You've got the LFO, the low frequency oscillator, which you can adjust the shape of. It repeats. Then you've got the envelope. So the envelope is kind of a shape that's made here, similarly, but it's got 4 parts, or up to 5 parts. Yeah, and this one has 5. So you can see 5 knobs here: attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release. And in analog, you'll see if we go to amp 1, we have 1, 2. In fact, we have only 3 boxes, so some are more or less than others. And in fact, one of these controls is a level, but not a point in time. Okay, so attack is basically, this is time, right? So you see seconds here: 1, 2, 3 seconds. Attack is how long it takes to get to this first point. So it's from 0 up to this first point, and it takes 242 milliseconds. So that's our attack, right? Right there. I'll make it a little bit longer. That's the attack phase. Serum's got this plugin here has a way of adjusting the curve between them, but a lot of I think this one's kind of got a way of adding curves too. But yeah, you can add a curve to your envelope here. Hold is, once it gets up to this level, it will stay there for a certain amount of time before it goes to the decay phase, which is a certain length of time as well. And to better demonstrate what decay does, I will turn down sustain. Now, I'd mentioned that one of these was a level. Sustain is basically the level that the decay this control decays to. Again, the attack goes up for 1 second, and then it holds for 483 milliseconds once it gets to this peak. Then it decays down to the sustain level. Sustain level being in dB, and the decay level being in milliseconds. So all of these are time except for that sustain level. Hold level will always be all the way up, because that's just how envelopes work. Sustain, I could bring down as far as I want it, or bring all the way up. Then the last phase is release, so how long it takes to decay out. And then what dictates how we go through this envelope? Well, it's whenever we press a note. So check it out. I'm not playing the right instrument. So let me turn this on record ready. Let me pick a different patch. Let's pick a simple one. We'll just do it. The most simple one there is. So bringing up a sine wave again, a sawtooth wave again. Our attack. This envelope is triggered, by the way, whenever you press a note, right? So whenever you press a note, it starts that attack phase, and whenever I take off, whenever I release my finger from the note, it goes immediately to the release. So this is what'll happen: is you press the note, it will start going through this envelope. It'll attack, go up to this hold. It will then decay down to the sustain level, and then it will hold. It's kind of confusing how to say hold again, but it will stay at that sustain level for as long as I hold the note. So let me turn the sustain level down to -12, so you'll hear it go up rapidly, and then you'll hear it decay rapidly to this sustain level, or not so rapidly. You'll hear it attack for let's do a second. It attacks for 1 second, then decays for 1 second, and then sustains here at -13. So here and you can see it. You can see it tracking through the envelope. And then release, I can pull that out. So when I take my finger off of the note, it will continue to decay away. Right? Let me make it longer. And then it extends on for some time. Now notice that when I release before the attack finishes, it just skips straight over and never reaches that peak. That's because the attack is still triggering. We can turn that down. And so on and so forth. So that's the envelope. It's a 5-part thing. It's a 5-part modulation source that is dependent on when you press the note. And this envelope doesn't necessarily have to be just on volume. This is another modulation source. This envelope just happens to be controlling volume at this time. If I were to, let's say, put a filter on, and let's say I wanted the filter to follow the same shape as the volume envelope, I can then drag this over to our cutoff, adjust the range just as I had before, and then we have the filter moving at this same shape, and also depending on when we press the note. And then we get a wow. 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 We could put multiple envelopes on multiple things. So I could put, let's do a little wavetail manipulation. I'll put this one on bend plus minus. I'll make it a short attack. And then I'll make it decay really quick and the sustain at 0. So it's just like a little spike, and it's going to go through, and release won't matter. If release happens, it's going to cut off immediately. It didn't really make much of a difference, did it? I'm going to make the attack longer, so this one will peak first, and then as it's decaying, the sync will go up. Right? So yeah. So you can make all sorts of interesting sounds with this. All right. Now, let's see what else is there. Oh, let's look at another synthesizer, shall we? Let's look at Massive X. So, Whoa, buttons, knobs everywhere. Let's make it simple. Let's make it simple. User or quick start and it. All right. With this one, I'm going to make it a little clearer. The routing. So this one's got the ability to sort of change how things are connected inside the synth. Like, example with this one, you've got oscillator 1 and 2. They are going into the mix, then the filter, then the amp envelope, and the envelope controls. Also check a look here. So this is how you change the destination of that LFO. Let's change the modulation destination. So, for example, you could have LFO 1 controlling the oscillator 2's, I'm assuming, the level of oscillator 2. You can have it controlling the mix, and so on and so forth. So that's how you do the modulation in Soundtrap. Here, it's a little bit more complicated. And my point I was trying to prove is that in Soundtrap, you can only see those controls in front of you. But with this, you can just take it apart and change how the synth is physically built. So let's say you had oscillator 1 and 2, but you didn't want both of them to go into a filter. You only wanted one of them to go into a filter and the other one to bypass the filter. So you could do that here. So you could say oscillator 1, you go to, so that I can see here that they're both going to F. I'm going to take oscillator 1 and actually undo this link. Let me just double click there, get rid of that. I'm going to just bypass it by connecting right to B. And you can see now that, let me make this simple. Let me not play the other track. Play this one instead. So here's what it sounded like when I just loaded it up. Let's make this one kind of different. And if I were to put a filter on them, well, the filter's already on them because you can see in the routing it's going through that filter. So you have oscillator 1 and 2. Just ignore all the other stuff for now. It's going from oscillator 1 and 2 into A, which is nothing right now. That's effects over here. And then into F. So if I were to take this A out and just connect these all up to F, then it would work the same. F is our filter. So if I wanted to, say, have oscillator 1 bypass the filter and not get filtered, I could just take oscillator 1 and then run it to B, and then it would only go through effects B and C, not A and F. And tons of stuff you can do with changing the routing around. But yeah, I'll get more into this on a later date, or depending on interest, really. But this is the kind of stuff that I like to do. The kind of music I like to make is more of the experimental stuff. I like to make sounds, or I like to make original sounds, as opposed to just putting songs together out of pre-built pieces, pre-built noises and audio and loops and all that. So let me think here. I think there's anything else in this that is immediately applicable, because I can't really see us getting into routing too much in this, because you really don't have a way of doing so. So this is just to say that there are more advanced synths out there that demonstrate these concepts better. So, quick overcap. a quick overview, recap. I just made a new word up. Excuse me, one sec. I have to blow my nose. Okay. So quick overview of the Soundtrap synth. Again, you get there by selecting synthesizer, opening up Tweak down here. So you have this randomize button next to it, by the way. Randomize will just take all of the knobs in here and set them to, well, random parameters. Let's get it off of Ableton onto Soundtrap. You can have fun with that, randomizing all the parameters around. Let's make it simple, though. So, you got your two oscillators here with your choice of wave shape. Again, the wave shapes are like so. Sine, triangle, let me use my laser pointer. Sine, triangle, square, and that square can be stretched or pulled out, right? It could be the amount of time it's on could be increased, or the amount of time it's off can be increased, vice versa. And unfortunately, we don't have an option to do that here in Soundtrap, but it's just square. You don't have like square 75% on, 25% off. Other synths do. I mean, other synths have the ability to draw your own waveforms in, so it's like, depends on how much money you're willing to spend. It's really, but the world, there is quite a lot out there in the world of synths. There's also analog synths. There's like modular synths. There's if you start to get into it, there's just a whole world of that stuff. It's a lot more than just software and knobs. Like this all came about. Like all of this synths and music and all of this came about because back in the day there were hardware synthesizers, keyboards that were big, and I can even show you like pictures of modular synths that let me just find one real quick. I'm gonna switch to my camera. I'd like to show you some modular synths. Why are synths important? Why are they around now? Like, what did they used to look like? And what do they look like now? Like, so check this out. This right here is a modular setup. So, back before you could just open up your browser and have two oscillators, a filter, an envelope, two LFOs to work with. This is like all sorts of, like, you've got maybe one of these boxes this might be an envelope, or this might be a sequencer. This, I'm not even sure, but there are some oscillators in here somewhere. But like every little box in here, like this oscillator, if you're talking about it in terms of like hardware and like, you know, outside of the computer and in the past, like this is what synths used to look like, and still do look like. People collect this stuff, and people manufacture this stuff, and it's like it's a whole craze. It is a whole craze, and cool. Let's kind of watch a little bit of this. You got cables just going everywhere, and each cable represents like an oscillator going to something else, or like a filter going to or going to another thing, and this is way more than just creating sounds with oscillators. He's using samples. He's using all sorts of devices and that do all sorts of crazy things, like all of the things that a DAW does, like in hardware form. It's just crazy that some of the things that you can do with synths. It's insane, really. But yeah, I hope that piqued your interest in synthesizers and showed that they can be useful. I think what we will do tomorrow is we'll kind of just stick more within Soundtrap, and we'll just work on getting some practical synth sounds to work for us. So we're not going to go into depth in too much depth on the inner workings of all this. I will just kind of gloss over and just show examples, like, but I'm not gonna go on too many tangents and talk too much about, like, I'm not gonna go into like modulars and keyboards. That's up to you. That's up to if you're interested in it, then go look it up. Like modular synthesis, analog synthesis is like so much cooler than you would think. That like basic sounds and oscillate, like all of this, how all this came about is very, very, very interesting. It's important though, because every song you hear on the radio today will have a synthesizer in it. I guarantee you. I guarantee you that almost. Well, it depends what station you're listening to. It depends if you're on, well, even on like classic rock or even country. They'll maybe not country. Perhaps not country, but there's most likely a synthesizer in it because it's had such an influence on music, like synthesizers, and all the cool things you could do with them and its evolution. It's just it's so cool. It's so cool. I hope you think so too. But for all intents and purposes, we're just going to make a couple sounds to help us in the Soundtrap, and then I think I will. Of course I'll do another day on this, and then tomorrow I'm gonna make some sort of assignment. I'm gonna say design your own sound and make it work within this template. So we're gonna be setting that up tomorrow. We'll set up like some sort of synthesis template, and I'll make a little sound, and then I'll have each one of each one of us who are actively participating, if any, if any show up during the stream. Otherwise, I will have it up on my page, and you all can come in and edit it and work on it and make your own versions of it. But it will basically be making your own sound. And There is a randomize button, but see, that's the thing. Okay, it has to have some effects too. Randomize button won't add any effects. But, these were already on the sound to begin with. See if I randomize. It's got a sound, you know. That one sounded pretty good, but it might not be the best sounding thing ever. So I'd recommend, you know, kind of going through what are the different types of LFOs. It's got to have some sort of motion on it. I'll demonstrate quickly how to make a little bit to use the LFOs in Soundtraps. Okay, quite easy. So we pick our LFO shape here. So the low frequency oscillator has a shape just as these have a shape. And we can pick here. We have sine. This S and hold is called sample and hold. So this is like a random stepping motion. So it'll be like up here, and then it'll go up here, and then down here, and then it jumps randomly around. And how fast it jumps around depends on that rate and the amount. Excuse me, hold on. So rate tells you how fast that oscillator is going to be moving. Well, in this case, it's going to be like jumping around because it's sample and hold. The amount, also the destination here, the amount determines how much modulation is going to be sent to this destination. So the destination here, you have several options. You've got the amp, which is the volume. You've got oscillator 1, which is the volume of oscillator 1. You've got oscillator 2, volume of oscillator 2. Oscillator 1 and 2. The mix between oscillator 1 and 2. You can modulate the filter. I believe that modulates the filter cutoff. And yeah, basically that. And the same for both. So let's do a little thing real quick. So I'm going to put on oscillator 1, I'm going to put a sample and hold. Well, no. Let's put a saw. A saw oscillator. A saw LFO. And let's do it. Get some weird stuff happening. Is something else playing? Let's start from scratch. I'm not sure what's causing all of that. Perhaps it's, nope, not Ableton. Three little batch. Synthesizer, the Filter Wave, go into tweak. Let's cut out all of the effects. Looks like we got a triangle going to the filter. Oh, it's gotta be turned on as well. Oh! Yeah, you gotta turn it on. And the oscillator is actually the pitch of the oscillator. It's not the volume. Yeah. It's the pitch of the oscillator, not the volume. You can't hear it because oscillator 2 is all the way down. This is what sample and hold sounds like, by the way. Oh, and the amount is like, oh, I see here. Okay, so the amount, if you have it at the middle, it's nothing. So if you have this at the middle, then there will be no effect. There will be no LFO going on. But if you go to the right, it's going to be a positive motion. So let's say if you had it's going to be moving this around, so it'll go up, right? If I go the other way, well, doesn't really seem to have much of a difference in terms of sample and hold. I think it just has to do with like yeah, it's the direction of motion. So if I move this way, or if I move to the right, then move to the left, it goes down. Man, it really doesn't modulate that much, does it? So that's one of the modulations. Let's turn on LFO2. Let's go to triangle and let's put it on our filter. And there you go. You've already got a cool sounding synth. And just like before, you have your amp envelope that if you turn up the attack, it's going to take longer to get. We've talked about envelope already, right? So we have the attack, decay, sustain, release. The sustain is actually a level. It's not a time. These are all times, right? Attack. It's a shame that it does not show you how long that attack is, but that's okay. You know, it's also you could just listen to it. Alright, I think that's pretty good for today. Like I said, we're going to be doing a little bit more of this tomorrow. We're going to be trying to make some practical sounds for this track, and I'm going to be talking about synthesis in more of a focused sort of way, and like making a certain sound, trying to create a certain sound, rather than just talking about the different modules in it and what they do and how they interact, and just kind of going through a bunch of software. We're going to try specifically focusing on this synth and creating sounds that will work for us and will benefit us and are good, right? We want sounds that will help us in this track. I don't know exactly what that sound is at the moment, so I just wanted to go over kind of basic synthesis. I wouldn't say it's more basic, but it's like synthesis overview. And I hope that it was helpful for those of you who had stuck around for as long as you did. Hope that you found this interesting, and I will be again continuing this tomorrow. So come back tomorrow at around 11:30, and we will be doing some more focused synth action. And I'm going to be making something. I'm going to be making it all in Soundtrap. I'll be avoiding doing any Ableton stuff for today, or not for today, for tomorrow, unless I need to talk about or quickly go over a concept again, which shouldn't be too bad. It's just going to be mostly music making tomorrow, not a lot of explaining. So it's kind of how I want to do the Fridays, is less so explanation and concept and more just making noise. Cool? Alright, so join in tomorrow. We'll make some noise with some synths and hopefully have y'all join in. Okay.